And we're back. We're back. And I'm all smiley because I have my sister friend. I got my sister friend in the space with me today. She's waving, doing the
Mhm,
heart. We were doing the whole Mr. Silly Nettie, patty cake.
mhm,
So, in full transparency, before we get fully in this interview, we're
mhm,
working with technology not being our best of friends. So, those of you watching the video, you may see a little lag. Those listening probably will hear it just fine. But I'm
mhm,
here with Dr. L. Toni Lewis, who I call Tony, and that's probably who I'm
mhm.
going to call during the space of this
Look,
interview. Look, how are you?
you know, you know, I'm better now, as the elders say. And look, you've known me in all the iterations before the doctor was even there,
Yes,
which this is the
yes.
20th anniversary of my doctorness. So, oh 04, I graduated.
Wow.
So
Girl.
that's yeah, that's where we are, counting things in decades right now.
Oh
So
gosh. Wow. We
I
are counting in
am.
decades.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, and I'm
So
super grateful.
how are you feeling? Like we're going to get into some real
Mm,
questions in a moment and I'm going to read
mm-hmm.
something to you, but I want to
Mm-hmm.
hear just some more. I
Mm,
hear like you said, the elders. I hear something in your voice. What
mm-hmm.
is that I hear? What would you explain that I hear?
So it's all the things is what it is. It's all the things. Because I'm truly my mama and my grandmama's daughter and granddaughter, a multi hyphenate empath out in these streets.
Mm.
And with my birthday being in early January, like the entry to the year is always a period of deep reflection and deep grounding to see how I am, where I am, what's next. And you're catching me
Mm.
kind of on the end of that. And
Yeah.
I'm in a space of being super joyful and content with
Mm.
my ecosystem, with my
Mm.
personal ecosystem and
Yeah.
my sister ecosystem and my family
Yeah.
ecosystem, because I spent a lot of time with my mom over the past couple months just reflecting and
Mhm.
praying and
Yeah.
imagining and organizing, and so that's been a blessing. I've also been blessed with kind of an interesting walk through the decades of my life over the past couple weeks, from speaking at my high school for the MLK breakfast, um, to getting on a plane at 8 in the morning and seeing sisters I hadn't seen from labor, in 15
Mm.
years, to like
Mm.
one of my mentees publishing a book. And in this moment where the flip side of that is the deep, deep grief of having lost some sisters and friends and seeing my people just going through it, because that's kind of I've put my purpose into my business and my how I live. Like the
Mm.
juxtaposition of the two things is just it's a constant pondering. So I think I
Mm.
was telling people around the new year that even though there's so much going on, the clarity of knowing who you're fighting for and who you're fighting with is a thing. Is a thing.
Mm.
Like I can look to my
Mm.
left, to my right, look at you, and be like, "Oh, it's let's go, ancestral spirits, healing, wellness, and we know all the systems. Ask us how we know." So
Right.
it's all those things. It's all those things. Like literally, and watching my sisters drop also has me in this space
Yes.
of deep, like deep listening. Like that body scan is on a
Ooh.
whole other level right now. And
Ooh.
what did
Ooh.
Tabitha Brown call it? Miss Perry, perimenopause, Miss Perry.
Miss Perry, she's been really vocal about that, which I'm
Miss
really glad
Perry.
she is.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think adding that element to the, like, okay, so the days that I may feel that I'm not enough are part Miss Perry and offer me some points of reflection because I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just, yeah, so it's a great time for this podcast because there's a lot of reflection and purpose going on.
I could just listen to you. You're very poetic. And I don't
Oh,
know
thank
if
you.
you just in your conversation. I know y'all are
Mm,
like, I'm telling you, Toni, this is Toni. This is how when we are in our
sister.
girlfriend talking, this what you're hearing. And that's why I love being with you because I know you're not gonna sit on the
Mm-mm.
periphery. You're
Nope.
not gonna sit on the periphery.
That's not what I'm here for. I'm sorry, the laugh. I don't know if you saw how ugly that laugh came out. I ain't built for that. I ain't built for that.
No,
My mama, my
no.
grandmama, all of them. And the more I learn about my ancestors, the more I'm like, oh, oh, I'm just like the 2024 edit of this. Okay, got it. Clear, clear, clear.
You
So,
are. And it's funny because I think, when
mm,
we were so much younger, when we
mm,
first met,
mm-hmm,
we were young. And so
mm,
but you've
mm-hmm,
always had a presence, but to watch
mm,
you become this woman that is so no so reflective and clear yet still
mm.
complex and still goes through shit and still honest about that
Child.
and present about that and still finding the thrive in that. Like, I love that so much. I
Mm-hmm.
love that so much. I love it
Oh,
so much.
thank
So,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we
Well, I'm
recognize
gonna.
each other, right?
Oh,
We recognize like recognizes like,
like
because
recognizes
if
like.
anybody on the podcast wants a preview or a an agenda for what like our conversations have been like over the last 20 some odd years, that's about it. You know, part poetry, part music, part what the hell did he do? Excuse my
Yes.
language on the podcast. Part Tyler Perry movie and and everything in between,
Ah,
tears and laughter.
yeah,
And so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Tony knows, and Tony knows a lot of my, and I'll just leave it at this, but she knows a lot of my dark spaces, spaces that were dark for me, spaces that were hard. And every time shows up with light and with how can I be of support and of like zero judgment. And that right there, like that is you know parts of things that have happened in my life and different relationships that I've had that really were very, very challenging and you still held light. So that's huge because few people, I mean, I have maybe, I easily can count on, a finger or two. I don't have very many people who I let in on that because it's hard. But all right, girl, we already passed what I was gonna do. All right, so I'm gonna read I'm gonna read something to you. I'm gonna read
Okay.
something to you. And then we're gonna go from there. So let me pull it up. All right, here we go. Dr. L. Toni Lewis is a licensed family physician, geriatrician, and the founder of Liberation Health Strategies. She serves on various boards and leadership committees of health and social justice organizations and is also internationally credentialed in Kemetic yoga, which is an inclusive and Afrocentric practice inspired by ancestral and ancient Egyptian culture, and fem, a multisensory fusion of dance, sensual motion, meditation, and celebration for self-care, release, and empowerment. That line right there is why she's here, y'all. But let me keep going. Dr. Lewis is originally from Mounds, Illinois, which is a rural city in southern Illinois with a population of 800, and currently lives in a very big city of Brooklyn, New York, in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood. Her mission is to improve the conditions of America's most vulnerable, with a special emphasis on the Black community through public health, health equity, policy, and leadership strategies designed to target social systems rooted in institutional racism and classism. Wow and wow. I listen, you have beautiful biographies out here and I was trying to like put it together and I was like,
Mm.
Lord. Um so how did that feel hearing me read that to you?
You know, it is it's I'm learning to receive and sit in it versus shrink. and be like, nah, nah, nah. It's like, no, no. Actually, you know, these
Yeah.
53 years I've put some work in, and I'm
Mm,
grateful for the tribe and everybody that poured into me. A
mm,
little bit of it is a charge, you know? So
mhm,
so so
mhm.
then what you doing? What's next, you know? Um
That's a good question. What
a
is
lot of
next?
reflection on that dash though. You know how they talk about like what matters is the dash on
Mhm,
on the headstone,
mm,
and in the whatever quarter we in, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, it's
mhm.
like, yeah. But no, but I feel it in my body. I always feel when people
Mm.
start, it's like, and then it's a journey, yeah. So hmm.
Yeah. When I was like I said, when I was reading through and just wanting
Hmm.
to figure out how I wanted to
Hmm.
read that to you,
Hmm.
um, what I think is so magical about what you're doing is you are
Hmm.
a physician. So you went to medical college, Tony is very bright. I typically don't read everybody's accolades of where they went to school unless they
Hmm.
went to Howard. I admit. I admit if you went to Howard, I do say HU. Okay, I
Hmm.
do. I do. She did not go
Hmm.
to Howard, but that's all right.
My mama
But
did though,
anyway,
and my auntie Tony did. I'm surprised you didn't do that. Like some when I was doing the thing at my high school, I actually
Mhm.
told folks my mom was a public school teacher, and I'm like, you could just erase all this and say Alessandra Lewis's daughter. You know, so you know.
I want to get into your mom because one of the
Hmm.
things that I've come, in the years that I've known you,
Hmm.
I think I may have met your mom one time, and I'm not
Hmm.
exactly
Hmm.
sure
In
in what.
Chicago, I believe.
Yes, yes, and
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
and instantly, her energy too just oozes. You guys
It
both
all
have
made
these
sense.
energies.
It made sense. It's like,
It made
oh.
sense. And you have a brother who I'm also friends with. So I
Hmm.
feel like I'm just like a friend of the family. But you all, and even in your brother, like Alan, he
Hmm.
too, I mean, it's a different energy, but it's one that's not periphery. And that's for me, that's just
Hmm.
I just love when people are willing not to just be on the peripheral of life and be willing
Hmm.
to kind of grab inside. But for you, you just
Hmm.
mentioned being 53 years of life, but when you think back, maybe I'm gonna pick, the 20s before
Hmm.
we got all into the past 40s.
Hmm.
Who was Tony in her 20s? Who was that woman then?
So Tony in her 20s. So that takes me from what, 91 to 2001,
Mhm,
basically.
mhm, uh-huh.
It's such an interesting thing. Like I had to actually put in the decades, right? Because
That's how I
I
think
somehow
now.
somehow I
Yeah,
remember the years more so than I remember. I kind of remember the big birthdays, but not the years. And
right.
91 to 2001, the 20s was hard.
Mm,
It was hard. It was a lot of reckoning with intergenerational violence and abuse.
mm, mm,
Um, a lot of figuring out, you know, like who I was and where was happiness and joy. Like where was
mm,
happiness and joy and rest? Because the
mm,
first, couple of decades were spent kind of surviving through a lot of things and watching a lot of violence, but also having joy and
mm,
tools to go. So it was really trying to figure out how to reckon all those things together. And the clarity
mm.
was medical school, you know? The not clear
Interesting.
was joy, family, dating, life,
Mm,
tribe. It was, stay on this path.
mm.
So it's interesting. I was mentoring some labor leaders the other day, and one of the younger ones said she was going through a quarter life crisis. And all of us elders were like, what? And then we were like, actually, actually, actually. Um,
Actually, right.
I also remember, so my first, PTSD, um,
Mm,
my first therapy, my first really being held by Black women outside of my family who supported me. And
mhm,
then when I left the domestic violence situation I was in medical school, when my grandmother sent me money and said, "I wish I had done what you did 30 years ago," like, you could just feel and hear, and then my mom got a divorce, you could just feel and hear the chains, like, da, 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 da. So that's how
Yeah.
kind of I was the middle towards the end, and so by the time I got to 30, I was like, "Psh, woo, child, like, what is," it was different. I
Yeah.
mean, 30 and of course
Yeah.
was, 9/11 and all of that. So
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
so it's a whole so 20s was tumultuous, I would say.
Mm.
And the
Mhm.
only clarity was I'm here to be a doctor,
Mm.
heal others, and then starting to learn that that also means healing self a little bit more
Mhm.
than I had been
Mhm.
doing. But yeah, it was tumult, and it was, the work of folks who are dealing with intergenerational stuff, which a lot of us are, especially those of us that
Yes.
look like this,
Yes.
is
Yes.
it
Yes.
hits you in different layers. So yeah, that's what I can
Mm.
that's what's top of mind to me. The 20s, I was like so ready to get out of the 20s. I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
I had lots of joy as I traveled, partied,
Yeah.
danced. I can name the clubs. I can name the road trips.
Yeah.
I can name all sorts of, thing that would be listed on happy and joy, and spirit. I can name all those things, but like my first thing is to be like, no, no, no. This is when I first started breaking those chains. Didn't
Mm.
realize it at the time because I don't think I had that language.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but when my but I it's etched forever in my brain that Grandma Sarah, you know, um,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that
It's
was the
funny.
thing.
I
Mhm.
was gonna say, that's how
Mm.
I felt in my 30s.
Mm.
Like, for me, my
Mm.
30s was very tumultuous. Like, I just
Mhm.
but to your point, I mean, and this is
Mm.
gonna be kinda my next question.
Mhm.
20s was that we get into the 30s, was there a seismic shift? And if so, what allowed that to be?
Mhm.
Mm.
So 30s, now we're oh 01 to 11.
To oh
Is that
01
right?
to 11. Yep.
Oh
Uh-huh.
01 to
Uh-huh.
11. The the seismic shift, we go like mind, body, spirit, career, purpose in terms of how I was like being,
Mhm,
in the world,
mhm, mhm.
was kind of an just like I'll say an explosion of opportunities that I could have never imagined, you
Mm,
know?
mhm,
So it starts off with one being me working at 9/11 and me getting out of like me being released from therapy and having tools and now
mm,
integrating them into my last couple of years of medical school. It's me
mhm,
moving to New York and starting residency. It's me getting involved with labor and becoming this speaker and community champion and, working with the Obama campaign. And,
yes.
by the end, I'm like, my first trips to Africa and my, to Johannesburg and Botswana. And like that's where in my 30s, it became let me not restrict my future to my small imagination
Mm,
because there's
right.
no way I could have predicted all of the networks, the opportunities, and there was pain in there. There was,
Yeah,
threats to my life when I was on TV doing stuff. That was, security.
yeah,
There was a lot we were doing, and and in the middle of it. But like
yeah.
part of what I've been reflecting on, I was with a group of that kind of global tribe of innovators just
Mhm,
2 days ago at a
mm,
foundation for like one sister who was in the trenches in another space with me during that time has now been at the head, the helm of a foundation for 10 years. And we were all thinking about our
mm,
10 year, what we were doing 10 years ago and what we're doing now. And we can just grin at that. So yeah, so it really
mhm.
was if 20s was kind of the work, and the just get to medical school, then 30s was, graduation.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
more I got into dance a lot more then. I got into dance a little bit in DC, but I really explored it and got into spaces here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I would say this if I
That's
could emote it, it's this. You know, if
she's
the
for those
20s,
listening, she's taking her
if the
hands out and expanding them like the
yes, yes, yes,
explosion.
yes.
Yes.
I'm doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Yeah, it's the flower bloom.
Yeah.
If
It's
you
the
know, if you know
flower
the
bloom.
right, right, like the lotus flower out of the mud kind of situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Hmm.
I'm gonna continue because you're just I said you're poetic. So I'm like, all right, now let's go 2011 to 2021. What the 40s? Because these
Child.
decades, this is really
Mm,
beautiful the way you're explaining this because the
mm,
whole reason I do this podcast is to show the evolution. My point
mhm,
is that, I think
mhm,
society and
mhm,
mainstream has somehow made it seem
mhm,
as if our 40s starts the beginning of the end. You know what I mean? When in fact, it's just to me each decade is planting the seed and clearing and
absolutely.
purifying and doing all that so that this next greatness can
Mhm,
kind of and expansiveness has its opportunity. So you're doing I just love it. So as you're going then to the 40s, because we're
mhm.
newly, 53 is still newly in the 50s, I say.
Mhm,
But tell me about that decade,
mhm, mhm.
40s.
So, so first, I'm gonna replay a bit for the folks who couldn't hear me so clearly on the when you said people think the 40s is the end. So, in my culture and in many diasporic cultures around the world, there's this thing called sucking your teeth or kissing your teeth, you know? And I did that, but I don't know if I did it loud enough to be caught on this podcast. Because what is more patriarchal than saying a femme body is not worthy because they're less likely to give you a baby?
Yeah, okay.
Because that's really what it's all about. Like our whole
Yeah.
worth, our worth declines when
Mm.
we stop. You know what I mean? Given
Yeah.
because that's what's patriarchal, and let's not get into misogynoir. Those spaces
Mhm.
like we are less worthy, less worth
Mm.
because our bodies start to change, but really we're less likely to give you know um, male bodies men an heir.
Yes. An
And
air
so
or
for those of you who
even
can't hear, I'm
or
making all the faces you want to make here. So
but to your same point,
yeah,
also, and I think the 50s really wakes this up. Our
so
bodies
much.
are less to give to anybody and like the
Child.
gifts to ourselves.
That's
Like
it.
really, it's about like, no, this is the gift I'm giving to me and
Mhm.
how I want to
Mhm.
experience pleasure and how
Mhm.
I want to experience whatever,
Mhm.
ease, if
Mhm.
whatever, and
Mhm.
not this beautifying or this um
Mhm.
whatever I'm doing is not uh, to get the attention of some
Mhm.
whatever external, but it's to get
Mhm.
more of the attention and knowing of self. I mean, that's how I feel now. It's like I see
Mhm.
this body more for how do I need to experience it inside. But I'm
Mhm.
interviewing you, so I want to
Yeah.
go back. So
We're at
when
11 to
so
21. 11 to 21 is
yes,
what we're
11 to
talking about, the
21,
40s.
2011, yep, 40s.
It was another big shift from
Mhm.
like institutions and also spaces where I thought I was safe and then was not safe at all,
Mm.
but then was super free, you
Mm.
know? And so
Ooh.
we ended with the pandemic for me, in 21 with me turning 50 in a year of the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it starts with 11 was a hard year because within two
Mm.
months I lost my uncle, my
Mm.
best friend died of cancer, like had been
Mm.
diagnosed on Mother's Day and was gone by August.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Mm.
the white womanhood in labor started attacking kind of my career and purpose in
Mm,
insidious ways, and then I had a
mm.
miscarriage,
Yeah. Wow.
all in like 4 months, and it was just like I was, thank God, divine goddess, spirit, ancestors, that I had tools in place from the
Mhm.
20s that
Mhm.
helped me and were repurposed to help me start my 40s with all of this. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I remember I
Mhm.
2011, it was hard. And a number of people who knew me were like, we didn't know if you were gonna be okay, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
grateful for
Yeah.
tools, like deep planted, you know what I mean? Deep planted seeds,
Mhm.
ancestral seeds
Mhm.
in work that I had done, from my 20s. And so in the middle of that
Mm.
came, all sorts of job stuff, body stuff. You remember the back pain I was having where I could barely walk? And
Yes,
so all
I
manifest, right? Like
remember. I
all of
remember.
the various things happening with relationship, with job, like if you name it, mind, body, spirit, career, family, finances, every single one. Every single
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And then 2 years in the middle, 15, 16 and 17, where I was just at a holding pattern because the job space was so toxic that they couldn't fire me, but they had to pay me, which elders said, okay, you got seeds, start planting for your own exit on the other
Mm.
side of the thing. And Trump was elected and all of this stuff was
I
happening at the
know,
same
right,
time. And
right.
so, but this is interesting though. And I know so many sisters who in 14, 15, 16 experienced some version of like ripping them from path A to path B.
Yes.
It
Yes.
just it was
Yes.
no longer physically, spiritually, economically something, and either got fired, got laid off, had to leave a relationship. There's a lot of folks that I
Yes.
know, a lot of black women that I really know, that if you ask them about 15, 16, 17,
That
they'll
was
be like
fit.
14, 15, 16, 17. There was like this awakening. And I feel like it
Yes.
was like if we got into the sci-fi space, it was like, our DNA was like, okay, it's time. Bing. Right?
Oh,
Because 16
absolutely.
comes and 18 comes, 16 comes, and we're like, oh, y'all ain't gonna listen to us anyway. And 18 comes and we're like deep into so it wasn't any so me starting a business to be me,
Mm. Yeah.
to be and naming it Liberation Health Strategy, so I had something to live into. That was
Mm.
informed also by knowing all of the sisters that had gone through stuff and what they were going through and what my mom had gone through, what my grandmother had gone through, was a seed that was planted in the middle of that. So that by the time we get to 21, I'm
Mm.
waking up like, oh my God, every inch of my life and my ancestors' life has prepared me for this moment.
Yes. Yes.
To be okay and to
Yeah.
offer at the local, national, personal, global level to make a difference. And it was, I think 21 was kind of the biggest, like six, seven figure of my business, you know?
Wow.
Great team, great people.
Wow.
The beginning of 21 was when I started going to the Harkness Dance Center for physical therapy and injuries, and cleared up that back and that knee and the whatever, like I meant. And so
Yes.
it's
Yes.
a wild, from like the most pain to like resolving that pain and seeing where I am in the why of everything that's been poured into me. Like I feel
Mm.
that's a thing that happens a lot in your 40s and 50s, that you're like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
so I see why I'm a dancer, and I see how I can call people in who are going through domestic violence stuff because I know it.
You
I
know
know
it.
it. I know
Yes.
I know the mental abuse stuff. I know the emotional abuse stuff. Like I know it.
Yeah.
I know it. So yeah, so
Wow.
it was yeah, it would be definitely a level of my liberation. Another level. If
Mm.
20s was one, and was definitely, and again, I'll just speak for a number of sisters that can share the where we were trying to make it happen in various political, healthcare, civic engagement institutions for those of us that are kind of who have been given that spiritual assignment. Because it's not
Mhm.
everybody's. I got that.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was like,
Mhm.
nope. Not only do I not want you to do this, but like it'll be unbearable if you try to keep doing it.
Yes.
It was wild. It'd be
You
like
know
it's like
what?
nails on the chalkboard. Yeah.
I'm so
Mhm.
glad you're saying this way because 2
Mhm.
things, and you're right, 2015 for me, I was separated in my marriage,
Mhm.
in that year, that whole year secretly, like, I wasn't really telling people about it because at the
Mhm.
same time, my music career, that was the height, that was probably when I was
Mhm.
doing the most. I was traveling, I was touring,
Mhm.
I was on the
Mhm.
radio, and it was like I was this crazy paradox of what was happening. The external was just like looking so gorgeous, and the internal was completely falling
Mhm.
apart. It's just a real,
Mhm.
but not internal of me. Like I felt more powerful because I felt
Mhm.
like I was finding my voice and I was really understanding myself, which is
Mhm.
what was informing me even more that I had to let go of this relationship. And so it was a
Mhm.
lot. So you're right. But what you were talking about with Black women and our careers, and
Mhm.
I'm watching now, and obviously now we're hitting now this 50s, which you've just started the third year, just the third. We
Mhm.
just completed 2 rotations. Um, but but well, I guess 3 kinda, because 50 and then 51, 52, so
Mhm.
like 3. But one of the things that, and I don't know if I'm exaggerating this because I am a Black woman and therefore I'm following Black women trends, I'm following Black women
Mhm.
movements, I'm following
Mhm.
it, so I'm like,
Mhm.
it could be that I'm just zoned in a certain way, but I'm just seeing so many it's this interesting space, especially our age, of
Mhm.
Black women just exiting. Not, I mean, exit meaning these toxic spaces. If it's
Mhm.
toxic marriages or relationships, if it's toxic
Mhm.
careers, job
Mhm.
places, toxic countries, cities,
Mhm. Mhm.
and really kind of making this exit. And
Mhm.
are you
Mhm.
seeing that too, or am I just obsessed with those spaces? So I see it.
Child, yes. All of the above. Yes, and so a couple things I want to say, and again, we could do this for hours and hours and hours. And I know we're getting ready to get to the you've already
I
done a bunch of
know.
time.
I'm like, I
I know. We'll do a part two.
see the 30
Um
minutes is already popped, but it's
but so two things. Um for everybody listening to the podcast, please know that for so many Black women, that's the thing. For the outward facing to be on fire. And then sometimes you get in the car and folks are in tears or in fights. Or like, and it feels like everything. And sometimes it's health, sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it could be, it's such a, I have been blessed to be the intimate ear for a lot of folks in a lot of high places. Partially because I'm a doctor and that carries a monicum of
Mhm.
confidentiality. Also
Yeah.
because, for real, like I'm in this country and I got that look. I got that kind of, I'm burning incense, which, it's right over there. Don't judge me. I got a candle right here. But I've been in spaces where like I've been in the
Mhm.
big seat and I've been on the ground and like folks can skip past the ask me how I know and skip past the will you tell everybody and just get in there with me. And when I tell you
Yeah.
very often there are folks that like look like they got it all together and and it signals a thing. And it signals a thing. And I think this is where whether it's your mama telling you to sit quietly and count to 10, or mindfulness and meditation practices, or sitting by the water, with your maya, whatever way you come to it, that kind of getting quiet to know what then needs to shift or the why for your spiritual
Mm,
thing. Like it
mhm.
happens a lot that way for us. And unfortunately, sometimes it does happen that, like, I remember, like, one of my colleagues in politics said more levels means more devils. That,
Mm,
like,
come on now.
the way our society is set up to not really want us to succeed in a lot of
Mm,
spaces, there does come sometimes, you know, like someone told me equity is a contact sport. Like there is kind of this. I mean, you look at Serena and Beyonce and the like people that can't Simone but can't doesn't matter
yeah,
who you are, how beautiful you are, how many accolades, how many receipts. Claudine Gay, Dr.
yeah,
Bonnie, like we could just run the list.
yes,
My mama, run the list of the
yes,
folks. The more they shine, the more we shine. There's this thing where like
yeah,
society wants to humble. And sometimes people don't even realize why or how they're doing it. So like I want you
yeah,
to feel like you're not alone, not crazy. And I'm just going to use that word in a colloquial word. You know what I mean? That way.
yeah, yeah,
Because a lot of
yeah.
times that happens. And the first thing, if you don't have a tribe where you all are talking like that, you might be like, I'm lying. I'm lying to folks by making them think that I'm successful when really my home is trash. And like let go of that.
Right.
Just I want
Let
y'all to
go of
breathe
it.
on that right now. Let go of that. Be gentle with yourself and understand that it's just information. It's just
Mm,
information on where you are in your path, you know?
mm,
So starting
mm.
there, starting there,
Wow.
starting there, you know?
Wow. Yes.
Um,
Y-
and on 50, I remember heading into
Yes.
50.
Ah, Tony.
What?
Oh,
What happened?
go ahead. Our video is doing funky things. No, it was static. I was just saying, Tony, this is so good.
No.
It's so
I think
good what you're
it's
saying.
the light we're throwing back and forth on each other is just making it glitch. So you're welcome, glitchy people or COINTELPRO or whoever it is that's listening
Ah,
in. Yes, it's me again, Dr. Lewis. Now we're here.
ah,
So
that is
anyway,
so funny. That is so
but
funny. Well, yeah, what were you gonna say about 50s?
so
And then,
so
girl, we are gonna wrap up in a moment because I try to respect my listeners. They know that from my
we
podcast,
love
we ain't
you.
gonna be here. Yes, but
I'll be
no,
back.
what were you? Please, yes, yes.
Two things.
Please
Two things.
share. Yeah.
So the first thing is the interesting educational historical context of what you're seeing in terms of people taking less ish. That we are only a couple generations out from women needing men to get credit cards, to get houses, to have a job, to be safe, to whatever. And so like our boomers are the first to kind of experience that, like maybe their practices, their lives don't require them to stay in pain to survive. The calculation's different for us. So, and you can see,
Mm,
Lord, these boomers are doing some. Ask my mom, who like when her class of '66 from Howard was on the yard, they were acting up and having a ball. Like people talk about them to this day and how they aren't cut their
mm.
hair, natural hair, doing the whole thing. AARP is a different magazine than it was, years ago.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so there's
yes.
that kind of historical context where one of my friends has this podcast, has this, kind of Substack that's called Let's Not Be Trash. And it's
Mm,
for men for other men. And he's like,
mm.
to be truthful, like that relationship that you covet of the grand staying together, like your granddad was probably trash. That's what he said. And your mom
Okay.
stayed there to make sure y'all were okay. So like
Right.
so we're in a kind of a truth telling space
Mm,
where we
mm.
actually have the ability to make choices differently. Not only
Yes,
do we have the opportunity, thanks to all of their sacrifices, like
yes,
I'm shaming nary an ancestor. Thank you
yes,
for following your spiritual assignment to get me here where I can be on a podcast talking about this. Like that's a
yes,
whole thing. So I
yes. That's
always
a whole
honor
thing.
it's not they didn't know self-care. Their self-care was I want my you know what I'm saying? It's a different thing. So there's
Absolutely,
that kind of
absolutely.
historic economical context where we have different choices and we've been given the space, including in the pandemic when we shut down, to really get like what serves us well. So there's that.
Yeah,
And then I'll
yeah.
just end with a friend of mine, um, burlesque dancer, yoga teacher. When I turned 50, she was like, "Welcome. The air up here, the air up here is fantastic. You
Yes,
know, you will be having a
yes,
conversation with your body where,
yes,
if you're still having a period, she'll be deciding whether or not to stay. That's okay.
yes, yes,
You may have some sleepless nights and whatever, but your body's deciding all of these things of where we're going to be in the next chapter. but the air up here
Yes.
is fantastic. And so
Ah,
I feel that. I have days where like I'm in the kitchen doing some alchemy and figuring out what herb, what chisholm bop, what tap in,
yes.
what is the
Well,
formula today that'll have me okay?
right.
But
And I
all in
think what
all,
I'm
mhm,
sorry. I was just want to say what you were saying, who just
mhm,
talked about welcome to the air and
mhm,
about the body. And I literally like it was like day one, the day after I turned 50. It was like my
mhm.
body said, so it's like said, so now we are now in a different phase, baby girl. And so all this little cutesy little stuff, we're gonna now kind of wise you up. And I really, and when I say that, meaning I am like, I'm gonna follow your lead. So when you're talking about the whole
Mhm.
perimenopause, like it's like, well, I just let her literally flow now. Like, is she here? Kinda. No. She's like, nah, well, no, I'll be back. Give me about 2 months. I might. I don't know. And so instead of me getting this is annoying. I'm like, okay, girl, I'll see you when I see you. We're just gonna see.
Right.
We just take care. And I had a guest who came on I think it was
Mm,
last year in season one when I did the podcast, who talked about as we age,
mm,
it's not that our body is just getting old, it's wiser and it's putting up
mhm.
with less shit. That's
That
what's
part.
happening.
That part. That part.
It's like, you know what? You know
Mhm.
better than to do this and this. You 50 some years old. Why are you still
Why are you still doing
thinking?
this?
Why are you
Why?
still doing this? And it's
Mhm.
like more, and so that's how I've now started to really approach me is like,
Yes.
you have had plenty of time to understand that
Mhm.
if you do not move your
Mhm.
body does not do well. You've had
That's
this
right.
is not
That's
rocket
right.
science. This is
That's
not
right.
any of that. So we're not punishing you, but we're not doing this the same
Mhm.
way because you
Mhm.
know better.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's been really, for me, the 50s have really kind of just,
Mhm.
that 40s. I loved my 40s. Like 40s was really an amazing decade for me. My
Yeah.
tumultuous was definitely the 30s. 20s was half and half. It was 20s was decent,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
my 40s was really pleasurable. And so my 50s is like, okay, so like it was pleasurable and
Mm.
that's really good. And you've learned the first, yes. And now
Mhm.
we got to go deeper, but deeper, not just deeper. Like
Mhm.
this is like serious girl. Like but not
Mhm.
serious in that way that's bad. Let's just use our wisdom, girl. Let's use our wisdom. Let's not play
Yeah.
around and just fiddle. Let's use our wisdom. So I could go on. This has been so good, Toni. And we're going to do a slight bonus.
Mhm.
Those of you who have enjoyed listening to Toni, you want to see Toni, I'm going to ask her a couple more questions around, because you've been talking. The ancestral piece has been interwoven in this conversation, and I
Mhm.
am in a season definitely of talking more about what does this mean when we say ancestral healing and so forth. So I'm going to spend a little bit of our time, I think,
Okay.
in our bonus.
Mhm.
But before we
Mhm.
go, can
Mm.
if tell maybe briefly tell Liberation Health Strategies, what does that
Mhm.
mean, and is that a community, a space that people may want to tap into? Tell us a little bit more about that and how people maybe can be involved, if that is opportunity in that.
I am not restricting myself, nor am I restricting our liberation. So I would say, absolutely. First of all, if the conversation, the vibe, or the name calls you, definitely look me up on Instagram at
Yeah.
DRLTL, Dr. LTL, or at Liberation Health Strategies. You'll find both of our pages there. And it really is, it honors the kind of multi-hyphenatedness of our lives. So I am a doctor, labor leader, organizer,
Mhm.
political. I've done all of those things, just like many of you have done a lot of things that usually society only wants to name you by one.
Come on
Um,
now.
but right, but at every decade, you deserve to bring your full on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So liberation is about, and I just love even the musicality of the word liberation.
I do
You know,
too. I
right?
do
It feels
too.
different than
The
freedom. It
cadence.
feels
Yeah,
different
it
than,
does.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
it is. We like to create as many spaces as possible where people can, in the moment, feel liberation in their bodies, minds, and spirits. But we also work to do that in our communities with systems, and for our future. It's kind of
Mm.
Afrofuturist. And so
Mhm.
that can be anywhere from doing healing circles to working with a big org on their truth, reconciliation, and healing, to like working
Mm.
with global African workers on decolonizing the labor movement.
Mm.
And that's literally like just this week. That's some of the things that we've done this week. And so, I would say if you kind of trying to figure out liberation, I'm always open for a conversation. But like
Yeah.
there is a piece of that that is anchored in kind of our the fullest definition of health, not the Western society free of disease and
Mm.
do you need medicine definition, but are you living your best life the way
Yeah.
you're here to do it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's liberation in a nutshell, creating as many spaces as possible. And we like to play. So come through. Or create your own. I look
Wow.
forward to seeing
Wow.
what this community is gonna do.
Every time you describe, I'm like, oh my God, I need to do a healing circle with you. Like, I mean, and I know we always, I have to,
Mhm.
because this is how I just think we need to understand health, period. We have to stop looking at health as just this physicality. It's so much
Mhm.
more. It's so much more than that. So, well, this has been a joy. We're gonna ask two more, maybe three, but definitely two more questions in our bonus.
Mhm.
And thank you. I love you and I appreciate you
Oh,
so
I
much
love
because
you.
yeah, this was really I know you, but when I hear people tell their stories, it's so inspiring for me. So
Mm.
thank you, for that. Thank you for
Oh,
that.
thank
Yes.
you. And I appreciate what you're doing. Look at you changing the world and creating the space and dropping light for everyone to fly. Like I appreciate
Mm.
that's not light. That is not light. We
No,
need
it's
you and I'm so
not.
grateful for you in this space and in
Uh
my life.
I
Child.
appreciate it. Thank you. I really do.
Mm-mm.
I think that sometimes when you're in friendships, your friends don't always fully
Mm.
see kind of these other spaces of you. Like they only kind of maybe see. And so we have done a good job, I think, of me. I see what you're doing
Mhm.
beyond, that. And so I
Mhm.
appreciate you seeing me. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it.
Mhm.
All right, guys who are listening, we're going to be back next week. But if you are part of Patreon, stay with us. We're going to continue the conversation. So we'll talk to you guys who's listening later.
Mhm.
Okay, bonus. This would be quick. This would be quick. So yeah, and you have talked. I am really. I'm about to do an ancestral healing
Mhm.
through
Mhm.
astrology day retreat here in
Mm.
Chicago at the end of this month, February. So by the time people see this, this will have already passed. But for me, I'm ever since my father passed away in 2018, that's when I really started for real, paying
Mhm.
attention to ancestral healing because I felt him and feel him so clearly. Like he makes his presence very, very clear with me. As years go through and as he's going through his different realms and where he's traveling and his
Mhm.
soul is moving, it's not
Mhm.
as tangible maybe as it was when he first transitioned, but it's
Mhm.
still present. And so this practice of honoring our ancestors and doing our healing through our ancestors, can you just
Mhm.
maybe explain what that practice means to you? Is there a
Mhm.
practice that you
Mhm.
do? And yeah, I'd love to hear that.
100%. And I'm
Mm,
gonna first, honor your dad. You know what I mean? And your
mm.
dad getting to know his way to communicate. You know what I'm saying? So that I
Yes.
had a friend actually. Sister Khadijah, tutor, owner of Life Wellness, who mentioned to me that some of her conversations with her dad have been better after the transition than they were
Oh,
even
yeah.
before, you
Yeah.
know? And so I've
Yeah.
heard that a lot, a lot. And as a
Yes.
geriatrician,
Yes.
I stay in that space. I am super uh, so going back to my mom, right?
Mhm.
Alsandra Faye Johnson Lewis. Um
Mm.
and so much of what I do, is is as I get to 50 and beyond, I keep unpacking like the little ways they taught that early that I didn't realize it was a lesson even or a thing.
Right. Right.
So my mom lost both of her parents when she was very young. Like
Mm.
her dad, she lost, when she was like a tween or a teen.
Mm.
And her
Wow.
mom, she lost suddenly when she was 25.
Mm.
And like, so just starting life, in her quarter life thing, like she had
Yeah.
graduated Howard, took a teaching job in South Carolina, took a teaching job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then was called home for my grandma Luella, who I'm named after, having a stroke.
Okay. Mm.
And then shortly after she passed, and no one expected her to pass, and she wound up staying home in Mound, Southern Illinois, and it changed her life forever.
Wow.
So my mom was very close to my grandmother Luella, and
Mm.
we're also my grandmother transitioned 9 months before I came on the scene. So the kind of joke is that we high fived in the ether to be like, okay, I got it, you know,
Oh
that
my
whole thing.
gosh, I agree. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but like ever since I grew up, my mom has always had her pictures of her mom and her dad on the piano. And like she's just in conversation with them because they were a unique and close unit. You know what I mean? They were part of the Great
Mhm.
Migration from the South. So they had lessons to learn. They love to create space for community, but they love their only child, Alessandra, together.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so for her, and like I think I mentioned earlier that I've been spending more time with my mom as she gets older and I have more space to kind of get these stories. But for
Right.
her, it's waking up, says her prayer, does her body scan, and goes right to the pictures like, hey mom, hey dad, how you doing?
Yeah.
What would mom and
Yeah.
dad say? And so it's just been part of the conversation, like they're, in the room, just like everyone else. And as we get into things, we ask a little, I ask questions about
Yeah.
healing and ancestral healing, like what did they go through to get me here? How did
Mhm.
they develop this spirituality that's more spirit and flowy and about the earth than it is about doctrine and having a middleman to reach the divine. Like how
Mm.
did you know what I mean? How
Mhm.
did thank you for fighting for my mom when she was a child and they said she would never be able to walk, for fighting to get her to the root doctor and the research hospital
Mm.
and the blah 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 blah. And what can I learn from the fact that grandma, you passed at 55 and all my mom really knows is that you were bleeding a lot and you were suffering probably more than you thought.
Mm.
So it's very personal to me in terms of digging into stories, but also deep appreciation all the time to see how the lessons from them that I learned. You know how you were saying when you get to 50, you're
Mhm.
like, okay, so like you've been told. So then there's that other layer. Like, what did my mom learn, and what do I need to learn from her lessons? And what did you
Yeah.
learn from grandma, and what would she say, and what does she say? And so it's a little bit of, you know, very personally going back and offering grace and love and flowers for all of the different things so it's a multi-directional relationship, but it's also like learning from like, okay, so my practice is deep in the I'm from a migratory people that will travel across rivers to make sure we have opportunities and can dream. Will create space for my mom to study French at Howard University in the 60s. Like who does that? Like who, you know what I mean? Like who creates a
I
space for your
love
daughter
that.
just to like
Yeah.
be like exploring and be
Yes.
okay with like, and
Yes.
like when she was one of four, like one of just a few black kids at the school to integrate, you came to have lunch with her every day and she just thought that was a normal thing every parent did.
Mhm.
Like how are the ways that you all show up together And how do you show up just
Yeah.
in your being? And so for me, it really is, it's that kind of both taking the wounds and the triumph, and all of the different things to kind of feed where I am now and to really get to know me and them together. I am loving
Mm.
how indigenous stories are also being told around this. Like we're seeing a lot with like DuVernay is doing
Oh my
such great
gosh.
work in like like
Yes.
her entire body of work,
Her
whether you're
entire
talking about Queen
body.
Sugar or Origin or
Yes.
whatever, kind of has little
Yes.
pieces in there of ancestral stories and how we can heal through them. And then I
Yes.
just finished watching like Echo on Marvel. There's, the Reservation Dogs where they talk about these matrilineal kind of,
Mhm.
there's even a superheroine called Echo where like she gets her powers from all of the women back to
Mm.
creation that pour into her. So I think for
Mhm.
me, it's as much about tending to and recognizing like all of the fullness of their lives. Like what made them giggle? Did they like to shop? What was the recipe? What made them mad? Did she cuss? How much did she
Right.
cuss? What was her favorite cuss word?
Right.
So
Because
so
these are
yeah.
cycles and,
Hmm.
there's cycles and where each generation is being called
Hmm.
to,
Hmm.
be expansive while
Hmm.
healing. Help the lineage out. And so,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I it's we could that's part of our part too, because there's so much of what you said, and I love hearing about, your maternal line, and it
Hmm.
particularly, yeah, moms at Howard studying French in the '60s, like that. I don't know how much more liberation there is. Like it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, that's a lot of beauty.
And tapped into political, engagement,
Yeah.
labor unionism, a teacher who organizes. Like there's just a so unpacking all of that, is such a thing. And it's
Yeah.
also, just an honor to kind of feel that like you got next. That t-shirt that
Yes.
is I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. It's
Yes.
like that, one of the best things anybody can say to you is your grandma would be proud of you. You know what I mean? When they say stuff like that, like, yeah,
Yes.
so
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
I love it.
Hmm.
Well,
Well then,
girl,
and
this
then,
is this is
also
wrapping
let
us
me
up.
just I know to wrap it up,
Go
but I
ahead.
do I do need
Mm.
to I mentioned the maternal side, but the paternal side was the woman who gave me the money to leave the abusive relationship.
Mm.
So and she loved the art, she loved theater, she was a teacher, she was an activist, and then she encountered that space. So part of my
Mm.
living and healing is to add some extra love to her spirit and to honor that, like that I heard what she said. So I want to,
Mhm.
it's all of them. It's
It's
all
all
of
of
them.
them. It's all of them.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for saying that. Because yeah, as I've been really digging more and wanting
Mhm.
to honor, I feel my father, but I also feel a heaviness, like, I also it's my grandmother and my father, like, I can tell that, and they're trying to carry me in spaces, and I'm still learning
Mhm.
and figuring it out and following the breadcrumbs. So,
Mhm.
well, this has been, again, magical. We are going to stop. I'm going to ask you this last thing of,
Mhm.
is there anything that you want to say leaving this space that you want people to hear, to know, either about you or just about anything that you think is,
Mhm.
important when it comes to this idea of finding, remembering, yourself?
Um, yes. So, what has held me so much is, and especially as I rolled from 20s, all of the spaces, each transition is finding my people. Those people you can be snotty crying with, ratchet on the dance floor, talking all the, talking about, sexual techniques, or about your colonoscopy, like finding those folks, actual subjects, or, about perimenopause,
Yes,
and
yes.
one of my really good friends, Iffy Ike. who's and I love her as a friend for multiple reasons, but she's also a decade younger. So we get to play
Mm,
this big sister, little sister, you know, this thing.
yes, yes.
And she sent me a video the other day that was part of a sermon where someone talked about how sometimes your path will lead you to change your ecosystem a little bit. And for a lot of folks, it may feel like I think a disruption, not or a death. And so people will like try to,
Mhm.
why aren't you here? Why aren't you there? You're not the same person. Like I'm not. And so to think of it as disruption and grief all around, but like really necessary, is okay. And I think that's helpful because I know
Yeah.
I deal with the guilt sometimes of not being able to circle back to everybody.
Right.
Um, but and also like just honor and be gentle with yourself as being a full human being. And
Yeah.
like that, whatever the ecosystem is, like on this particular day, Kenya, may not be what it was this day last year, and may not be what it needs to be next month.
Right.
But I'm gonna trust my
Right.
heart. I'm gonna trust my
Right.
heart on that and the quiet times as well. So that's
Absolutely.
all.
I
That
love
that
it.
kind of disrupting the ecosystem when you have to move and how people react
Yes.
and how your body feels, and treating it that way versus being guilty. Kind of just
Absolutely.
yeah.
That and
Mm,
when other people are moving in theirs and allowing them
yes,
to move and not
that
personalizing
part.
it
Come.
as whatever. And even if it is personal, even if the
Mm-hmm.
person is like, I can't stand you, I'm not talking to you no more, then that's best that the two of you really
I'm
like
crying.
seriously, it's like no,
Look,
because
I'm sorry,
I
the
just
viewers, the listeners didn't get to see my Capricorn reaction. It was like, oh well, like nope, nope, that's not what I meant.
It's
But yeah,
but
go
it's
ahead,
true.
Kenya.
It's like I mean, I was
Yeah.
today I was doing I do what's called Payo, so it's Pilates and yoga together. And
Ooh,
I
that
was
sounds
in my
awesome.
Payo, I was in my Payo flow, and there was a thought of somebody, and I was like, this person, I don't think this person really likes you. And it's like, and that's okay. Like that's actually
Mm,
really okay because if they're for whatever reason uncomfortable with
mm,
something you said, did,
yeah.
it is best that this is as opposed to you trying to be in this weird entanglement. It is best that it be left
Mm-hmm.
be. And if that's not what's happening, it is best because if it wasn't best, it would be. And it's not. So, I think that I never called it like ecosystem. And obviously as I'm growing, as I'm changing, as I'm moving, as I'm being more open, talking about spirituality and talking about astrology and talking and doing more expansive things than music. Because well, why aren't you doing music? Because I'm more than that. And I still love music. Music didn't go nowhere. But there's so many layers. And so really allowing myself the joy that I am actually having. And if other people can't necessarily
Mm,
understand it, it's okay. And it's not my
mm-hmm.
job to now go back and help them figure that out. Now, if they want to ask me
Yeah.
and wants, me to get some clarification, I'm happy to share that. But I'm not gonna which I tend to I will hold myself back in fear of
Mm-hmm.
other people not
Mm-hmm.
understanding all of these shifts. And
Mm-hmm.
so yes, ecosystem. I'm gonna start using that word, ecosystem.
The
My ecosystem.
last, and I know, dear listeners, we're at the end of the time, and
I
I
know we got,
appreciate
yeah, and
you
I'm like,
so
oh, and
much.
I got another meeting. So
I
I know I'm like, oh, I
know,
gotta shut
I
up. But go ahead.
know.
This is our last
The
thing.
last, the word I wanted to throw in is grace,
Yeah.
because to your point, like especially in this particular time where we've got the pandemic and all these transitions and mental, physical, spiritual, economic, you just never, ever, 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 ever know the 100% of what everyone's going through, nor the millions of, what do you call them, good spirits, lights, angels that are being deployed for yourself or
Yes.
them. And it's almost like completely removing your ego, your whatever you're going through from all of those painful points to allow for grace to move and to have. It's been a lifesaver for me, this, especially during the pandemic, to have grace
Absolutely.
for even when people are coming at me with the hardest shards. It's like, I don't even know. That ain't got nothing to do with me.
It
And
ain't
if
got
it
nothing to
does,
do
I'm
with you.
sorry because I didn't mean. But just grace for like
Wasn't
whew,
intent.
this moment.
Wasn't my intent. Yeah, yeah.
Grace for this moment.
All right, we
Grace
gonna
for this
push
moment.
stop.
Appreciate
We gonna
you.
we go. Ah,
Thank
don't
you.
leave yet. Those who are watching, we are gonna stop the recording. Tony, you stay tight. 1 second. But this has been lovely. And like I said before, when we
Thank you.
stop the other, I appreciate you beyond.
Appreciate
So,
you.
uh, all right, guys, we'll be back next week. Take care.